Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here every week, as you know, dealing with interesting topics and meeting interesting people. And we welcome back a guest from last week to expand our topics on international politics and economy.
Yes, as you may recall, we had Marc Nuttle on last week talking about international matters, including, but not limited to, China and Russia. We're bringing back Marc this week to talk about the United States and Oklahoma.
How is our economy doing?
Yes, and how are some of the things going on around the world and in Washington affecting both of those economies?
We'll get to it. Marc Nuttle, today's guest on The Verdict.
Rosetta Stone, Chickasaw, take one.
Action.
My name is Nevaeh Smith. I am 14 and I am Chickasaw. Hitlali.
My name is Jariah Iachabi. I'm 13 and I'm Chickasaw.
Rosetta Stone Chickasaw Level 1 includes 40 lessons. It's centered around a Chickasaw family.
I'm really proud to be part of this. I'm glad I got to take part in something so big and so exciting. It's awesome knowing that we can be able to help other people learn the Chickasaw language.
So host Chief Foot Bill.
I'm proud of my heritage and keeping the culture alive. I want people to use these lessons and spread the language more.
That's a wrap.
Chipisalacho.
Chapisalacho.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Well, he hardly needs introduction, but I'll do a little bit on it again today. Marc Nuttle is back for another show with us, in addition to the show he did last week. As you may recall, he's an attorney in Norman with very, very wide-ranging practice in economic, political, and philosophical matters, both around the world and in the United States. Marc is the governor's appointee to the Oklahoma Health Care Authority, so when he gets to talking about Oklahoma, he has firsthand experience with dealing with the budget problems in Oklahoma. He has been an advisor in a number of political campaigns, national and local, and he has been an advisor to presidents at the highest level. Marc, welcome back. Glad to see you again.
Thanks, kids. It's always fun.
We're going to talk in this first segment about domestic politics, domestic economics, and of course a lot of people are looking at the White House wondering what's going to happen next. But one thing that seems to be imminent is that this White House believes in job creation. They want to create jobs in the United States, and they're emphatically staying on message.
Well, they have three things that they've set out for objectives to the new cabinet. One, jobs. Two, security. And three, to do this in a way that it protects the environment in balance. So if I was to say what they're talking about, jobs, security, in balance with the environment. And of course we have Attorney General Scott Pruitt is going to go up and do a good job on working in that. But yes, jobs and security.
Are you bullish on the American economy?
I am. I absolutely am. We are in the driver's seat. Here's why. I'll make this next statement to get the attention of the conversation. Because like we did with China, it's important to understand the backdrop of what's really going on and not what the press debates. You know, and my problem with the national press, guys, isn't so much that they're liberal, is that they're not complete in their analysis of the subject, and therefore the public doesn't get the full picture. So let's talk about that a minute. And here's the statement. I believe today that the United States dollar is more powerful than an atomic bomb, if you want to put it in the context of our dealing with other nations. Yeah. And why? We're the world's currency, not the world's reserve currency. There's no currency that can compete with it in the next 18 months. China has desperately in the last 5 years tried to develop the yuan as a tradable currency in their region, and it's not working, and it won't. The euro is being challenged by Brexit. Theresa May, the Prime Minister, has said that we are going to make a clean Brexit or a clean break. Well, nobody knows what that means yet, and will there be others to follow? So my point is, the euro's not going to challenge the dollar. What else is there? So in international commerce, international trade, transactions, long-term debt, you either have to be in a dollar or have an exit strategy to be able to get into it overnight if you need to. That is a very, very powerful tool. Now, the flight of capital to the United States is extreme. It's going other places than just the United States, but being in dollar-denominated assets is a critical part of any national portfolio, even in your currency reserves. Now, so there, the last point is, we're not just, the Federal Reserve is not the Federal Reserve of the United States. It is the Federal Reserve of the world. So now, we have always been a benevolent nation. We're the first nation in the history of the world to be dominant in military and economic power. And we've not used that to overpower or subject other nations to our will. We need to continue how we develop with our partners using the tools that we've been given by the grace of God and how this is all developed. The dollars are powerful. Okay, now what does that mean? It means that how we manage our currency to the Federal Reserve, what it does to interest rates worldwide, and why is this so important? Here's the last point on backdrop. We have talked about debt on this show in previous meetings. World debt continues to rise. There are 182 trade partners in the World Trade Organization, roughly 189 in the World Bank, and about 191 recognized by the UN. Not one of those nations is out of debt, and most are in excessive debt to their gross domestic product, including all industrialized nations. Only Switzerland comes close to balancing its budget. Now, what does that mean? In the world's economy, we have about 84 trillion in debt against 75 trillion in product and services, cash flow in dollars now. Paying that debt back is critical in what the interest rates are, how you finance further activities or infrastructure, or if you're a third world country, how you get money from the IMF. All of this now revolves around the dollar, the cost of the dollar, interest rates, and the availability to dollars. That's why I say it's as powerful as an atomic bomb. You restrict dollars to a country, you make our cost too high to them on a case-by-case transaction, they can't survive. So now what do we do with that? Well, I believe the United States of America is in the absolute catbird seat to lead the world out of this. And as we talked about in China, it's not a communist system, a world capitalistic system based upon free enterprise and balancing that with morality. Finding out what is in the best interest, down to those who need help, and we all do at times. So a humanitarian approach to world economic development managed with our Federal Reserve, our Treasury, and our dollar is where we are today. Now, I've got a few thoughts on where we go from here as the United States, if you want to go there or...
Let me ask you a question. You haven't mentioned the United Nations. Does it play a role in doing what you're just aspiring to see us do?
Well, it does in a couple of ways. One, the World Bank and the IMF are probably more important than what I was just discussing, all which came into existence right after World War II. The UN has, through their initiatives, tried to take control of world assets by saying anything that is involved in the world should be managed through a UN tribunal. The sea, and managing the sea and the resources of the sea. But they also now have initiatives for banking, the internet, communications, transportation, anything between nations, into a world government, the UN. And that is a huge mistake, because it's not a matter of blending countries. That's not going to work. You have to decide what system works for all countries and lead them to it. Now, this wasn't something I was prepared to talk about today, but the United States of America, beyond being the light of the world in our economic and banking system, and on providing opportunity to create jobs at a living wage, we advance some principles. Now, we can do this without dictating the form of their government, including the only constitutional monarchy on the planet, which is in Jordan. And that is, we believe in due process, rule of law, free and independent courts, free and independent press, and transparency. Just those 5 things. And it is proper to advance those in how we trade and how we provide foreign aid in all that we do as a country, because those things, transparency eliminates corruption, you know where the money in, money out, where your dollar's going. But then the freedom of those other things, due process and enforcement of the law, is what many countries have such great difficulty with, because they still are in a system of tribal government. Birth is destiny, and they try to control that from generation to generation rather than release it to freedom and free enterprise. And we have an obligation to present that to the world.
Our relationship with the rest of the world on a trading scale, we talked about, he wants to renegotiate all these trade deals.
Right.
What's your opinions on that goal?
Well, it's very difficult, because it's been 73 years since we set in place the current structure of the world's financial systems, when everything was restructured after World War II. Kings and queens went away, emperors went away, and into a global system. And so there's been a lot of layering. One is, most of these trade deals have a defense component. Many of them have a State Department component on how human rights are dealt with inside the country. There are intellectual property agreements separate to the trade agreements that all are kind of intermingled in this web of a complicated contract. You try to untangle all that, it's very difficult. Now, the current United States Trade Ambassador would say, or that office would say, that you have to do it by industry, the auto industry worldwide, telecommunications worldwide, manufacturing, transportation, aerospace.
So not country by country, but
Well,
industry by industry.
Industry by industry, and the countries comply with it. That might be possible, but doing it deal by deal, but I'm not ruling it out yet for this reason. If your purpose is to create jobs in both countries and negotiate who gets the jobs, just not the money. Wall Street, as a pure capitalistic system, will make profits and not consider the jobs, and that's wrong. That's what government's supposed to do, in this balance between capitalism and morality. But if you negotiate who gets the jobs, at what level? So we talked this on the phone, Kent, it's in my latest Nuttle report. Why is it that Ford can build a car plant in Canada and nobody complains and celebrates it, which they have? Yet if they attempt to build one in Mexico, there's outrage and threats of tariffs. Why? It's because Canada and the United States are in parity economically with their middle class. The average income as a percent of GDP in Canada is about $51,040. In the United States, it's $53,000. And the point is, you build a plant in Canada, the workers can afford the cars they build. That was the whole point of Henry Ford and the manufacturing and assembly line when he made the Model Ts. I don't want my workers not to be able to afford a Model T. Now, in Mexico, the average per capita percent of GDP is $10,000. But so how do you negotiate that deal? Well, you got to understand what Mexico wants to do with jobs, and we have to give them jobs that help their economy grow at their state in their cultural and economic cycle versus what's going on in the United States. But we don't think about jobs. We think about money, profit, return on investment, and that's not all that's involved.
Let me get us to a break. When we come back, we're going to bring it home and talk about Oklahoma's economy with Marc Nuttle.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
We're back on The Verdict. Our guest is economist Marc Nuttle, and we're going to talk about the Oklahoma economy and how it's affected by the rest of the country.
Okay. Well, let me make one last closing comment on the United States. One of the things that President Trump is saying that he will do is either a tax holiday or reduce taxes on corporations who are holding money offshore. The estimate of that is as high as $4 trillion, but whatever it is, it's billions of dollars. And I think he'll get that done. And it makes perfect sense. You know, bring it back, get it to work here in the United States, and then start taxing it even while it's here. But then if they try to move it, then you tax it again. You don't give it to them for free and they can just come do things with it and move it back offshore. Getting that money here and getting manufacturing and redoing trade, renegotiating trade deals where jobs are created in different sectors at different levels. One last thing, not to go down this trail, but some jobs aren't going to come back as they did when they left in the 60s because of technology, robotics, automation. That's all got to be considered in the negotiation as our different level of skills and workers not compete, but complement each other. Okay, now, given that, what does that mean to Oklahoma? Let's talk about Oklahoma for a minute. We have some inherent historical problems that's nobody's fault, and that's the first thing I want to say. None of us were here when this was no man's land. None of us were here when this was Indian territory. And none of us, very few of us were here when it was pre-statehood, or maybe somebody over 100 years old, but you get my point. It's not, what I'm about to describe is not anybody's problem, but it has to be addressed. Number one, Oklahoma is 1/3 more rural per capita than any other state in the Union, North, South Dakota, Wyoming. Now think about that a minute. Why is that? Because we're a land-run state. People were given land, and the attraction was go work the land, not because there was economic activity out there in those areas. We have a 77 county grid based upon a half-day's horseback ride to the county seat and back to get there in daylight and home. And those counties were established under that premise rather than the need for the economic activity of a county. In New Jersey, you have 33 counties for 30 million people. They added roughly, but they would add a county when the economic demand and the economies of scale were greater served by having an extra county than keeping it all back here and holding it for the growth of the state, the way it should have been. Okay, so it's nobody's fault. We were a land-run state. Further, we have too many school districts because probably we were Indian territory and they were designed for that. They've been, at one time we had 1,000 school districts. Now, what is the collective burden of this? It's a couple of things. About $100 million are just providing services. Okay, it doesn't balance the budget, but it's a start. But here's the point, guys. We're too rural. Our health is deteriorating in the rural areas. We can't support the healthcare system in the rural areas through hospitals by county. We've got to go to some sort of regional economics. You know how India does it? More populated state with a nation with rural areas. They have minor emergency healthcare clinics for profit in the rural areas. And the state spends its money on getting somebody from a minor emergency clinic to a regional hospital in 20 to 30 minutes when needed, rather than having the whole service in the hospital there. Now, everybody knows this. I mean, I'm not coming up with things that people haven't heard of. The point is that all of these changes require sacrifice and commitment for the next generation. And it's time to restructure the state. I got to say, Ken Miller's right. We have a revenue problem, and it's more
state treasurer.
State treasurer, and it's more of a problem than this. About 4 years ago, I was asked to make a presentation to the state legislature on the budget process of the state of Oklahoma and future projections. So we brought in some economists who manage the state's money. It couldn't have been a better hearing. Everybody was there that was a state leader. I shouldn't give the names, but the right people were there. And the bottom line is that this is not just you can't just reform the structure. This isn't just about taxes. We are an ad valorem tax system, and the bottom line is this. The rural areas are growing in cost faster than the urban areas can make money to pay for it. Now that was not OCPA, but another study. But the problem is it's structural. We have a structural problem with the budgeting of Oklahoma, and it's got to be fixed. Okay, so what are some of the solutions? What could we do? Well, consolidation is one of them. We have too many college campuses per capita because we're a populous state. That was all part of the development of the 30s and 40s of Oklahoma. Okay, so we're not going to eliminate counties. We're not going to eliminate college campuses, but we could consolidate purchasing. We could come up with a better system on distribution of assets to maintain the infrastructure and so on and so forth. Healthcare has got to come up with some sort of a regional basis to provide it. I do believe that the sovereign Native American tribes can be very helpful. They're solvent by, I mean, goodness gracious, they make a lot of money. Okay, I'm not asking them. I'm not going to go to a table and say, listen, you guys got to give us some money after you went through what you went through in the forced march to Oklahoma. Okay, but now what's going to happen with the Donald Trump administration changing things? A lot of manufacturing and physical properties are going to return to the United States of America. What we have is land. We have a favorable tax system. We should be right in the middle of that, trying to attract those industries and saying we're open for anybody who wants to come back inside this country offshore for any reasons. We have central location for distribution. We got to be pushing for air cargo and other things to work with Alliance and Forward, never to compete with them, but to leverage off of their business plans on a regional basis. We should count Houston as our deepwater port. And think of ourselves regionally like that for all these things. So it's consolidation, it's restructuring the budget. I'm all for the initiatives of aerospace and biomedical. Those are industries of the future. But getting into and thinking through over the next 4 years what all this means that Donald Trump's trying to implement: deregulation, less taxes, less taxes on the front end and more on the back end. All of these things could be an advantage of Oklahoma. Why? Because we have open areas, we have an open system, we don't have inner city problems, unless, I mean, not sort of like on the east and west coast, that are an advantage to attract national and foreign investors.
What do you think, what do you predict, I should say, is going to happen in the oil and gas industry in the next 2 to 3 years, particularly from the standpoint of price of crude?
One, I think it's going to grow, and I think it's going to stabilize. There are guys a lot smarter than I am on this, and so I just read the national journals. Some projections that I see for next year that I have confidence in are $67 a barrel.
The 67 would put a lot of people in a lot better shape, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Because where is it now, about 50?
Yeah, about 50, 52. But going to 88, that seems to be the if OPEC will hold. But what I would like to see is us being, and that's the problem with Oklahoma. We're an oil and gas agricultural, basically driven economy. Right. And we have to adhere to a world price. We can't set it. We can't control it. We can't negotiate it. We just produce it and get the best that we can. But I think that the oil and gas industry, and particularly our leaders in the oil and gas industry, of course, you know, you got a guy, Harold Hamm, is very close to this president. And I think talks to him on a regular basis, and I think he listens to him. But the point is this. I think that the United States can have great influence on stabilizing the price. Now, let me just take a guess. I'm going to say $88 a barrel. That's what I hear generally over the next 4 or 5 years. Well, a lot of things work at $88. Yeah. Not the state budget, though. It doesn't make, even at $80 oil, we still have a structurally flawed system for revenue.
We're going to have to make that the final word. Mark, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you.
It goes fast.
We could talk for hours, but at some point we have to look at our watch and say it's time to say goodbye. We'll have you back, though, on a future show if you'll lend us your time.
Oh, I'd love to come.
Kit and I'll have a final word after this.
Bye-bye.
There are now 11 million of us who live here and work here. I was 15 when I came here 6 years ago. I raised my family here, drive my truck to my job every day. The only difference between now and 6 years ago, I do it legally. I wanted to, because this is my home.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, Each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
I really think people are so unaware of the number of kids waiting just in Oklahoma. And I think if more people knew that those children were out there waiting, I think that just by the way we live our lives and the people we talk to, that maybe we can help encourage adoption from Oklahoma.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. We're wrapping up the show with Marc Nuttle.
Yeah, Marc was really good to come on and give us his time talking about the domestic political and economic situation here in the United States and more specifically in Oklahoma. He's a real expert, and we really do appreciate him coming and chatting with us. And we love to make him available to you. We'll try to do it some more.
These are interesting times. We hope the legislature or members of the legislature were watching the show, and Marc's urging to hit the reset button on revenue and consolidation. Seems like there's a lot of work to do in those areas. We have some website information, more information on Marc at his website, marcnuttle.com, marcnuttle.com. And we have a website, theverdict.tv. Tell us about a guest you'd like to see on a future show. We're going to have to wait just a couple of seconds here. But Kent, I really think that Marc's so generous with his time, and we really appreciate him coming on the show today.
Well, indeed, it's not easy for him to. It's hard to catch him in town, quite frankly. But when we do, he's always generous and giving and terrifically helpful.
A wealth of information. Yeah.
Indeed.
And that's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week with another episode of The Verdict.